recap from Tata Steel, and we have a special one for you. We are choosing a game from the challenger section. It is Arjun Erigaisi taking on his countryman, Surya Ganguly.
And Arjun Erigaisi, after 6-round, Robert, he's on 5.5 out of 6. He drew his first round game against Lucas Van Fares, and he's just been on a tear ever since.
He can't stop, won't stop. And in this game, we saw an Italian game, but instead of a quiet line with pawn to d3, we saw a d4 Fiona, so it's clear that Arjun was in for a battle.
Absolutely. A fighting opening choice, Arjun, a young up-and-coming player, and he is not afraid to enter some more tactical territory. Usually we see the quieter d3 played.
Exactly, just to defend the pawn on e4 and then castle and develop your pieces. But instead we see d4, and after pawn takes d4, e5, d5 is an important strike, because the point is while your knight is under attack, you are attacking the bishop on c4, opening up your bishop on c8, bishop b5, the knight jumps in, and Fiona after pawn takes bishop b6. This is a position that is well known to these players.
Yes, absolutely. This position has been seen thousands of times before, so we're still deep in theoretical territory. Arjun here continues to develop with knight c3.
Yes, he does. And Ganguly, one of the best prepared players himself, has worked with former world champion Vishy Anand as part of his team. He castles, and after bishop e3, we see the move f6. So Fiona, we understand the move. It challenges white center, but it's also a bit risky.
Yeah, as Van Feingold says, never play f6, and this is one of the positions where we understand why does Van say that. We look at the king on g8, and we see that a queen could potentially appear on b3. In either case, you are opening up some lines, some diagonals in front of your king, and in general, you have to be very careful when making pawn moves like that.
For sure. And in this one, the pawn captured through a knight takes c3, hitting the queen, so you can't get away with moving this f-pawn. After pawn takes the queen takes f6, white castles, black plays bishop g4, and Fiona here, black decides to take on f3, and now white has the bishop pair.
Yeah, and well, we'll see. Indian legend Vishy Anand, he famously said he loves playing with the knight pair, but the new generation is here, and let's see how Arjun Erigaisi put the bishop pair to use.
Well, after rook d8, he said, let me drop that bishop back to e2. It's done its duty. It won the enemy bishop. And now, after knight a5, he pushes pawn to a4, which means that the knight is kind of stuck, because if that knight were to move too soon, the white pawn would venture forward. For example, after here, bishop takes c4, pawn takes c4. It doesn't quite trap the bishop yet because there's bishop c5, but you don't need to win a full piece. It's okay because the bishop is under attack. Let's move our queen to b1 out of the pin on the d file. Once the bishop moves, you lose b7. You'll probably lose a7, c7 as well. It's not going to be good news for black. So that's why that knight has to stay put on the a file over here. c6 makes sense to solidify the center, but Fiona, after bishop d3, I know you're liking the look of white's position.
Yeah, suddenly the bishops are getting activated. The bishop from d3 is looking down all the way at h7, and well, we see on the very next move, it's like Arjun was reading my mind. The black bishop dropped back to c7, and in comes the most powerful piece, queen g4, and suddenly, well, there's already a few threats. All the white pieces are getting ready to look down towards the black king.
That's right, bishop g5, also a threat. That's why the rook came from d8 to e8. And honestly, black's position looks quite sound. You have the rooks connected right close to each other. There are open files that black's rooks and queen are on, so that looks good. But the problem is the game opens up. The bishops show their dominance, and white went rook e1. Black played the bishop to d8, didn't want white to put a bishop on g5. And here, Fiona, this is one of the strangest blunders I've seen, not because it's a horrible move. It looks like a perfectly reasonable move, but as we see after queen f3, the evaluation goes sky high for white.
Yeah, such an interesting moment. Queen f3, to the human eye, looks like a natural move. You want to try and trade the queens. The black queen infiltrates the white position, but it turns out this was already maybe the decisive mistake. Arjun says, I'm not interested in a queen swap. Those bishops are working beautifully, and now let me look down at that weakness on h7.
And the queen being on f3 gives the bishop a tempo, because after g6, bishop e2, step one, that bishop has gone all over the board. c4, b5, back to e2, capturing on f3, back to e2, to d3, now all the way back to e2. And after the queen drops back to f5, guess what? It's that bishop's time to move again with bishop g4.
Yeah, and once again, I mean, could all of this lead back to the moment when Ganguly decided to play f6? Because we see, once again, the weaknesses on the light squares around the king. There is no black light squared bishop that can help fight along that color complex. So the black queen here had to drop back, and in comes the other bishop.
Yes, and now there's a huge, devastating threat. If you make a move like a6, which you shouldn't make because it's on the other side of the board, in comes a bishop to e6 check. You don't want to give your rook for a bishop, but if you move your king to either g7 or h8, the problem is bishop e5 will in fact win this black queen. That's why bishops are so powerful on an open board. So Fiona, instead of a6, the move h5 was played, but that king is really, really weak.
Yeah, having to take drastic measures, but the bishop pair just continues infiltrating the black position, comes into d7, attacking the rook. The rooks get traded, but now white firmly in control of the e-file. The bishop pair is working beautifully. The position is completely open, just what the bishops were hoping for. Black tries to get the king into safety, and in comes the next white piece, Robert.
Oh, no, you got to bring all the pieces into the party. Rook e6 is such a good move because queen f5, the bishop no longer attacks that square, right? But if you play the move queen f5, I see the bishop, I see the queen. The only thing in the way is the rook. So a move like rook e7 check would pick up the queen, and even the queen trade would still be really good for white. So nothing that black can do really helps out. The knight on a5, not in the game at all. So queen f7, the queen backs up, and rook d6. I thought we liked that open file, Fiona.
Yeah, but the rook is now looking to free up the square for the bishop. Once again, that bishop has been everywhere. It's now looking to move itself and for the rook to infiltrate along the 7th rank.
Just great piece movement by Arjun. He understands the threats and where the pieces belong. Queen moves to e7, doesn't matter, bishop to e6, and now rook d7 is coming. So black, Ganguly, he tried with rook takes f4, please, please, please take me back. You then lose your rook on d6. That would obviously be a tremendous blunder. So instead, after rook takes f4, we see the rook land on d7, and Fiona, it was a matter of technique from here.
Yeah, now Arjun is going to pocket some material, takes the queen on d7. He now has a queen for a rook and a knight, and from here on out, it actually ended relatively fast with Arjun just showing his technique to convert the material advantage.
That's right. He did not take his foot off the pedal. Brings his bishop to c8. Plays g4. He's going after this king, and there was really little that black could do. It's too little too late with that knight. It finally enters the action, but after takes on h5, the bishop comes to e6. Yet another nice bishop move.
Yes, very nice, cutting out the black rook from the defense. Now the queen is getting ready to join the game, maybe via f5, and the rook is just helpless. So Ganguly tried to bring the king to g7, but in comes the next piece. The pawn from f4 is suddenly joining the game as well.
That's right. You bring all your pieces into the attack, then it goes to f5, and Ganguly takes on e6 because he sees that the checkmate is coming. Now the bishop is defended on e6. The queen is free to gobble up the pawn on h5, and then come to g6 thanks to the f5 pawn, or into the f7 square thanks to the bishop. So rook e6, pawn takes, and now it's a queen for 2 minor pieces. Takes some more stuff, queen to e8 and queen to d7, and he resigns because his queen side is collapsing, and that is your round 6 rapid recap. Honestly, Fiona, just such a